All right, so we've introduced Jupyter already, and we've used Jupyter a couple times. So you may be asking, like, why are we choosing to use Jupyter notebooks? Well, first of all, so Jupyter has really evolved over time, and Jupyter actually came out of the IPython project. So we mentioned earlier about the IPython command line interface, and how Jupyter has kind of built upon that to kind of create a more interactive data science and scientific computing environment. And a benefit that's really been driven by Jupyter is that it's an environment that can be used by many languages and not just Python. In fact, the name Jupyter comes from Julia, Python, and R, three programming languages that have been kind of central to data science and statistical computing. But actually, Jupyter can execute well over 40 other languages. So you can write a lot of different things within Jupyter and have a very interactive environment for that programming language. And that is a huge benefit. So why do we really care about this? Well, most of the time when we are doing statistical computing or data science, we are focusing on a few different things. One, exploratory data analysis. In exploratory data analysis, it's very interactive. And Jupyter provides a great environment to kind of test out code, execute it, explore the results, go and adjust it, re-execute code, explore the results, maybe do some visualizations and see the output. And using other kernels or environments with it for Python to do that kind of workflow is very difficult and a little bit clumsy, shall I say. And so Jupyter provides a very nice environment to do that. I mentioned data visualizations. So there are some advancements in using other IDEs such as VS Code or PyCharm to do visualizations, but Jupyter really provides a great environment to do visualizations, anything from like a static visualization all the way to interactive, maybe like Plotly, where you can kind of hover over and see individual data points. So very interactive visualizations. Another huge benefit is whether it's writing reports or just mixing both prose or comments with your code. And Jupyter provides an environment that we can write what's called Markdown, which is a very simple, lightweight text formatting language. And it allows us to add headers, it allows us to emphasize words with bold and to italicize, add lists. Basically everything you need to write a full-on report, but do it in a way where we can combine both text and also code within the same document. And that is extremely useful. So lots of times people ask, well, when is a good time not to use Jupyter? And that's kind of a difficult question to answer. I would say lots of times I see when we start moving certain types of data analysis from an exploratory phase into production work where we have to either automate the procedure, have code executed at certain times, on a scheduled type of basis. Lots of times we end up moving code out of a Jupyter notebook into a .py file, and that code orchestrated in a way for our production processes. But that's not always the case. And in fact, there's a great article that's worth reading, and I'll provide this link. And this is an article about how Netflix actually uses a lot of their Jupyter notebooks directly in production. And so, when is it a good time to not use Jupyter versus a good time to use Jupyter? It all depends on the way that the organization operates. And largely, I would say it depends on how an organization has adopted their production processes. A lot of organizations prefer to have their code that's in production to be within executable .py files versus notebooks, but realize that's not always the case. All right, so let's take a look at a Jupyter notebook here, and I just want to call out a few important things that I want you to kind of work on, play around with, and learn more about throughout this class. And most importantly is when we look at Jupyter, we have two main types of cells. We have what we call code cells, and these code cells can go ahead and they can execute code in them. But we also have what's called markdown cells, and we can change the type of a cell by going up here and change it to markdown. Now, it is going to change the cell that is highlighted, right? So if we have two cells here, you can go back and forth between them. And when you choose the type of a cell, it will change the one that is highlighted, right? So markdown allows us to add text, right? So for example, I could say, all right, the above code computes 2 plus 2, right? And when we hit enter, right, this will now look like normal text. And the benefit about this is when we use markdown, we can actually have all kinds of different formatting capabilities. For example, say I wanted to add a header. This is some title, right? So I could add a header with a single hashtag. If I want to have a second level header, I could do that. So let me do this. This is a second level header, and it'll be slightly smaller, and so on, right? We could also create lists. Here is a list, and I could have this just be item 1, item 2, item 3. I could also create an ordered list like this, where it's item 1, item 2, and item 3, right? And so it will format that. We could actually do, we could also do some math operations, or not executing math operations, but putting equations within our markdown. For example, say I wanted to say 2 plus 2, right? And I enclose that with the dollar signs, right? It is going to render that, whoops, it's supposed to be 2 plus 2 equals 4. It will render that in equation format. So you can actually have quite sophisticated equations rendered directly within Markdown. So the nice thing is you can have discussion around your data analysis. You could have equations for what you're trying to compute, and then you could incorporate the code directly below, above that text, and that allows you to have more context around your data analysis directly in your notebook. Now, Markdown can do wonderful things. It actually is pretty easy to get going with. This is a fantastic article for you to go ahead and read, and it will start walking through all the different types of syntax that we can use directly within our notebook to render different styles of text via Markdown. All right, so an important thing to realize here is when we have different cells within our code, we can obviously use the arrows to go up and down in between them. And we can actually go into what we call command mode and edit mode. So command mode is what we use for creating and manipulating cells. And edit mode is what we are actually doing when we're changing the inside, right? So say I wanted to come up to cell 2 here, and I wanted to go into that cell and then to make some changes. Well, when I see that it's highlighted, which it is here with this coloring on the right, if I hit enter, it now goes into the cell, and I could go ahead and I could say, actually, I wanted to save this as and then execute, right? Now, anytime you are directly into a cell, so let me enter into this markdown cell, if I was gonna do some editing here, and then I wanted to go out of it, I could just hit the escape button, and that will go out of it. Now you can see it doesn't actually execute, because when you escape out of it, it doesn't execute. So if I am in here and I want to execute this block to either render markdown text or to execute actual code, then I can go ahead and I can do command enter in my case, or if you're a Windows, I think it's control enter. Now there's lots of different shortcuts that we can use. Say I wanted to create a new cell above this highlighted one. So you can see the markdown cell is highlighted. If I want to create a new cell above that, if I use the keyboard shortcut A, that's going to create new cell, right? So I could do some new code there. If I wanted to create a cell below this, I could just do the shortcut B, and that's going to create a new cell below it. Now, if I want to delete a cell while it's highlighted within the command mode, I can just do DD twice, so the keyboard shortcut D twice, and that will delete the code chunk. Now, there's a whole bunch of short keyboard shortcuts that you can do within a notebook, and I've included those directly within the reading, so you can kind of start testing those out. And that'll allow you to do things such as switch between markdown and code cells. You can, like I said, insert cells above, below, delete cells, restart the kernel, execute the cell, and so on. One thing I do want to call out here is when we have a code chunk such as this. Now, the last evaluated operation is what gets printed out. What do I mean by that? Well, so I want to evaluate 2 plus 2, and I can do that, and the result is 4. Now, let's say I want to evaluate 2 plus 2, but I also want to evaluate 3 plus 3, okay? Now, when I execute this, what happens is, yes, 2 plus 2 is ran, it is executed, but it's not rendered. It's not evaluated or printed out within the notebook. The last one in our line here is. Now, we can get around this. I could actually say I want to print the results of 2 plus 2, and then I want to print the results of 3 plus 3. And when I do that, it will print out both. But for the most part, the way to think about code cells is we want to do one primary task in there, one computation, and then, excuse me, we can render those results. We often don't want to do too many operations within one cell because lots of times you may want to look at multiple outputs. So just realize that that is a case that if you were to try to do, let's say A equals 2 plus 2, B equals 3 plus 3, and then you said, well, I want to see what both A and B are, you're not going to get what you're expecting because it's just going to show us that last evaluated expression B. I would actually delete this out and I would say, show me A, and another code chunk, show me B.